Hi there, thanks for joining me again this week. My name is Abby Miner. This is the Poetry Path, and this is the third in a series of lessons that will introduce you to many different kinds of fundamental tools of poetry, and we'll read poems, write poems, and talk about poems. If you joined me last week, you've already begun to study comparisons in poetry, those moments where we compare one thing to another in order to reveal something surprising or delightful or new about the things that are being compared. Let me give you an example with a poem that some of my students wrote several years ago. It's called The Daffodil. The Daffodil by Keith Doughty and Grant Owen. Yellow as grandma's house, soft as silk, shaped like a shower head that sprinkles baby daffodils' nectar, silent as a library where you read poetry and books about pollination and the Bible, tastes like powdered eggs, smells like pepper, petite as a radio antenna picking up Loretta Lynn. So that poem uses a kind of comparison we call a simile, when we compare things using the linking words like or as. If you were with me last week, you've spent some time since then considering a small natural object and noticing many things in the world that it could be compared to. But you might not have written a poem yet, so why don't you take some time now, if you were with me last week, to pause and write a poem like The Daffodil. Simply a list of your favorite comparisons that you made to whatever natural object you were working with when we met last week. In writing your poem, consider which comparisons you want to put first. Does one lead to the next? Is one your favorite? Take some time to enjoy your writing and then come back when you're ready. Welcome back. Now that you've warmed up with writing a short comparison poem, let's talk about another kind of comparison called a metaphor. We create a metaphor when we get rid of those small linking words, like or as, altogether, and fuse two images, often using the word is. So we could create a metaphor by saying, the daffodil is an operating room. Some poets say that metaphors have a kind of power that goes even beyond similes because we are using our imaginations to transform one thing into another. And that's what we're going to try today. Last week, we looked at small natural objects to make similes. This week, we're going to broaden our view of the natural world and look at a bigger picture. Clouds moving across mountains, sunlight on water, or wind, or rain. We're going to focus our attention this week on weather, watching it and making metaphors to describe it. I want to invite you to find a view that intrigues you, maybe out your window, or on a walk, or even further afield. And I'd like you to spend some time with that view and whatever weather it brings your way. You might want to do this activity from your writing area, looking out a window, or take a notebook outdoors. Either way, here's what I would like you to do. What weather do you see, feel, hear, or smell? And what are some other things in the world you can compare the weather you're experiencing to just in terms of color? How about just in terms of smell? Or just in terms of how it feels on your skin, just in terms of how it tastes, just in terms of how it sounds. When I look out my window, I see rain on green grass and a very white, cloudy sky. So I might notice that the rain is the same color as my grandmother's old house coat. I'd write, today the rain is my grandmother's pale blue house coat. Then I might think about that white sky. What else in the world could I compare that to, just in terms of color? How about today the sky is an unwashed eggshell? Then how about the way the rain feels on my skin? It's delicate, like the fronds of a fern. So, today the rain is a whole acre of ferns. Notice that I'm using the word is rather than the words like or as. Rather than making similes, I'm making metaphors. So I say, today the rain is a whole acre of ferns, rather than today the rain is like an acre of ferns. You should pause the screen here and try it yourself. Try making at least 2 metaphors for each question. Welcome back. I hope you discovered some strange, surprising, and wonderful weather metaphors. Now I'd like to share with you a poem that's all about weather by the poet May Swenson, who wrote about nature in wonderful and wild ways. So here's May Swenson's poem, Weather. Weather by May Swenson. I hope they never get a rope on you, weather. I hope they never put a bit in your mouth. I hope they never pack your snorts into an engine or make you wear wheels. I hope the astronauts will always have to wait till you get off the prairie because your kick is lethal, your temper worse than the megaton. I hope your harsh mane will grow forever and blow where it will, that your slick hide will always shiver and flick down your bright sweat. Reteach us terror, weather, with your teeth on our ships, your hooves on our houses, your tail swatting our planes down like flies. Before they make a grenade of our planet, I hope you'll come like a comet, O Mustang, fire eyes, upreared belly, bust the corral, and stomp us to death. In this poem, May Swenson is comparing something abstract, weather, to something concrete, a horse. And she sticks with that comparison throughout the whole poem. That's what we call an extended metaphor. I would bet that Swenson began by making one simple comparison, that the weather is wild, like a horse. Then she turned that into a metaphor by deciding that the weather is a horse. And she extends that metaphor throughout her poem, referring to the weather's teeth, hooves, harsh mane, and lethal kicks. I'd like you to try creating an extended metaphor where you stay with your metaphor for a while and keep exploring it. So choose one of the weather metaphors you made earlier in the lesson. I might choose, today the rain is my grandmother's blue housecoat. Now, in order to extend that metaphor, I have to think about some of the qualities of my grandmother. How did she move? How did she look, smell, feel, and sound? I think of cigarettes and also of the worn, soft cotton of her clothes. Happily, the rain today seems to have those qualities too. The rain is worn cotton, full of holes. Pause the screen here and enjoy exploring and extending your metaphor. Allow yourself to be surprised. I hope you took quite some time to explore your extended metaphor, and maybe that you'll even take some time to keep exploring it after today's lesson is done. We are just about done for today, and I hope you'll keep noticing the weather around you, comparing it to other things in the world, and making these interesting and wonderful metaphors. You could look back at May Swenson's poem Weather on the screen and use that as a model for building your own extended metaphor poem, or you could simply keep taking notes. Sometimes poems evolve over months and even years. As you keep looking at the natural world and making comparisons, keep in mind that it can be difficult to separate what we call nature from the human world, our world. So don't be afraid to allow maybe that piece of styrofoam tangled in the rhododendron roots by a creek into your poem, or allow public bus fumes into your nature poem. Sometimes those juxtapositions are very poignant because they reflect the world as it is. I'd like to end today by sharing with you a poem that does just that. A nature poem that doesn't exclude the human world, cars, the radio, because nature includes all of that. This poem is by Al Young. It's called The Mountains of California, Part 1. And it was published in 2009 in this wonderful anthology called Black Nature, 4 Centuries of African American Nature Poetry. The Mountains of California, Part 1, by Al Young. These demonstrations of the one God, green in the springtime, in wintertime too, and all that time John Muir was out here, living with them, breaking himself in on them. I just ride amongst them inside a car, flip the radio off out of respect, and out of the feeling that there are more important waves floating in and out of us, mostly through us. The mountains of California. Do I have to say anything? I love all this evidence set up to surround me this way. Mountain, ocean, you just name it. Thanks again for joining me today. Even though the length of this lesson is rather short, the material is rather large, so I hope you spend some time with it even beyond when this video is over. If you'd like to share any of the writing you've created today, please email it to Galaxy Arts and Education Coordinator Renee McGowan at rmcquown@ciu10.org. That address will be on the final screen of this video as well. Thanks again, and see you next week.